Hi friends, this is LeanReads, where big ideas meet practical takeaways, all distilled from great books. What if everything you thought you knew about language was wrong? Jacques Derrida's of Grammatology challenges our deepest assumptions about writing, speech, and meaning, and invites us into a world where nothing is ever fixed. Want to explore more? Check out the link to the book down in the description. All right, let's begin. Of Grammatology, first published in 1967, overturned traditional assumptions about writing and speech, revealing that writing is not merely a tool for recording spoken words, but a fundamental system that structures all meaning. This groundbreaking work became one of the cornerstones of post-structuralist thought, reshaping the way we understand language, knowledge, and the construction of meaning in philosophy, literature, and cultural studies. Jacques Derrida, 1930 to 2004, was one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. He taught at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris and later at the University of California, Irvine. His seminal works, including Writing and Difference, 1967, Speech and Phenomena, 1967, and Dissemination, 1972, radically transformed philosophical thinking about language, meaning, and truth. Moreover, his concept of deconstruction reshaped entire fields, from literary criticism to political theory. Derrida was honored with numerous prestigious awards, including honorary doctorates from the University of Cambridge and Columbia University. In 2001, he received the Theodore W. Adorno Award for his lifelong contributions to philosophy. A new perspective on language and meaning. Since the dawn of history, humanity has assumed that spoken language came first and writing followed. Writing was seen merely as a device to capture speech, preserving words on clay, paper, or stone. But what if this assumption is fundamentally mistaken? What if writing at a deeper level is the very element that shapes how we think, express ourselves, and comprehend the world in ways we had never imagined? In 1967, French philosopher Jacques Derrida overturned this deeply rooted belief. He demonstrated that writing is not simply marks on a page. It is a vast system of differences and relationships that provides the very conditions for meaning to exist. Once you grasp this, you begin to notice its traces everywhere in the ways we communicate, in our thought processes, and even in how our brains function. Writing, Derrida suggests, is not just a tool we employ. In a sense, it is writing itself that employs us. In what follows, we will explore how humans have understood language, meaning, and themselves. Through the key insights of this revolutionary idea, you will gain an entirely new perspective on the world around you. Reversing the order. Think about how you learned language as a child. You started by listening, then moved on to speaking, and only later began to write. This sequence feels obvious, even unquestionable. For thousands of years, philosophers and linguists treated writing as a mere tool for recording speech, a kind of technical backup system for words. Speech seemed pure and natural, while writing appeared artificial and secondary. But Jacques Derrida noticed something peculiar. When you say a word like tree, you understand its meaning partly because it differs from other words, such as bush or flower. In other words, you know what tree means partly by knowing what it is not. This system of differences existed before you ever uttered the word. In fact, it had to exist first, otherwise the word would be meaningless. To see this more clearly, imagine you are in a foreign country where you cannot understand the local language. You hear two people speaking. You can clearly perceive the sounds they produce, yet those sounds carry no meaning for you. This is because you lack access to the system of differences that gives meaning to their speech. That system is a network of relationships between sounds and concepts, what Derrida calls writing in its deepest sense. Now think about how you are reading these words. Each letter and word makes sense only because it differs from other letters and words. The letter A is A because it is not B or C. This system of differences exists prior to any act of speaking or writing. It is like the rules of a game. You must have them first before you can play. This realization turned everything upside down. What we usually call writing marks on paper is only a visible form of a much larger system. That system consists of relationships and differences, the very conditions that make meaning possible. It precedes speech, writing, and everything else. And it is not confined to language alone. It is also how we think about the world itself. Once you grasp this, you begin to notice its imprint everywhere. Every thought you have, every word you speak, every meaning you understand depends on this hidden system of differences. Speech is no more natural or direct than writing. Both are part of a larger structure through which we create meaning. Race and absence. Derrida's philosophy does not stop at showing how meaning emerges. He also observed another striking feature of meaning, one that shaped much of his later work. Meaning always depends on what is not present. He called this absent presence a trace. Once you grasp this idea, you will begin to see it at work in every word and concept you use. Try a simple experiment. Close your eyes and think of a cat. What makes the image in your mind cat-like? You might picture a specific cat, but the meaning comes not only from that animal, it also comes from every cat you have ever seen, and even from non-cats, such as dogs, rabbits, or other animals. The difference between them is what defines cat. For Derrida, this shows that the meaning of cat carries traces of all those absent things. And not just animals, the word also derives its meaning from not being a tree, a brick, or a sofa. This peculiarity becomes even clearer with concepts tied to time. Take the word breakfast. It has meaning because it differs from lunch and dinner. It also carries traces of all the breakfasts you have eaten before, and those you anticipate in the future. These traces are not actually present when you say or think the word breakfast, but without them, the word would be meaningless. The same rule applies to emotions. The happiness you feel right now carries traces of past joys and sorrows. Every experience leaves a mark or trace that shapes how you experience the present moment. In other words, nothing exists in pure isolation. Everything carries the traces of what came before and what might come after. This is not just wordplay or abstract theory. Think about yourself. Who you are now carries the traces of your past, as well as the person you may become in the future. Your personality, your memories, your hopes, all are formed by invisible traces of what is no longer or not yet present. This insight changes how we think about presence and absence. We usually treat presence as primary and absence as mere lack. But Derrida showed that it is absence, the traces of what is not there, that actually gives presence its meaning. Every meaning we create, every thought we have, every word we speak depends on the interplay between presence and absence. Understanding the trace explains why meaning is always shifting, and why no interpretation can ever be absolute. Each person, each moment carries different traces, producing new patterns of meaning in an endless dance of presence and absence. The end of books and the dawn of writing. When you hold a traditional book in your hands, you usually expect to find a story or an argument presented in full. A book should have a clear beginning, middle, and end. This sense of completeness is deeply ingrained in the Western imagination, where knowledge has often been pictured as something that can be packaged, bound in leather, and placed neatly on a shelf. But Derrida observed that this model is gradually being displaced. Think about how you gather information today. You might begin with a random article on your newsfeed, which leads to an interesting video, then to a heated social media discussion, and eventually to a specialized academic paper. There is no fixed starting point or conclusion here, an endless network of connections. Smartphones embody this shift as well. At any moment, you can tap into countless streams of text, images, and data. You no longer read in a single, linear order from top to bottom. Instead, you skim across overlapping layers of meaning that interact with one another. This is not simply a new way of reading. It is a fundamental transformation in how meaning itself is generated and experienced. Take emojis, for example. When you send one to a friend, you are using a form of expression not bound by spoken words. Its meaning comes from visual patterns, cultural references, and shared understandings. This is a kind of writing that has broken free from the linear structure of the traditional book. This new form of writing is everywhere. As you move through a city, street signs, billboards, traffic lights, and architectural designs all create a complex system of meaning. You are reading the city without ever opening a book. Even the social media feed is a form of writing, a hybrid of images, text, reactions, and connections and combinations never seen before. But in reality, this is not entirely new. It simply makes more visible what has always been true. Every text, even the most traditional, is linked to other texts. Every meaning is bound up with other meanings. The digital age did not invent this interconnection. It only made it impossible to ignore. This shift challenges us to think differently about knowledge and meaning. Instead of searching for a final answer or a complete, closed system of knowledge, we must learn to navigate these endless networks of connections. The future does not belong to bound books, but to the open network. Not to finished texts, but to the infinite possibilities of writing. Breaking down binary oppositions, human beings often tend to divide the world into neat pairs of opposites: nature and culture, mind and body, inside and outside. At first glance, these divisions seem to help us grasp and make sense of reality. Yet Derrida noticed that such simple oppositions begin to blur once we examine them more carefully. This reveals a truth long recognized by ancient wisdom traditions such as Taoism. Consider the boundary between nature and technology. Should a bird's nest be regarded as a product of nature or as a kind of construction? What about a dam built by beavers? If we say these are natural, then shouldn't human houses also count as natural? Viewed this way, the line between nature and human creation becomes increasingly indistinct. Even your own body resists this division. The bacteria in your gut do not share your DNA or cellular origin, and so are not technically part of you, yet you cannot survive without them. In the same way, your thoughts are shaped by language. Language arises from culture, and yet it feels entirely natural to you. Or take the opposition of inside and outside. Consider your skin. Is it inside or outside your body? The truth is, it is both and neither. Skin is a living boundary, constantly exchanging matter with the surrounding world. Like the yin-yang symbol in Taoism, each side of the opposition contains within it the seed of the other. Once you start paying attention, you see this pattern everywhere. Think of a border between two nations. Does it belong to one or the other? In fact, the border itself resists neat categorization. The same is true of your memories. Do they exist inside your mind or outside in the world where the experience has happened? In reality, they occupy both spaces, challenging our ordinary categories. Even the divide between truth and fiction is not as clear as we imagine. Every factual account requires imagination to be retold. Every fictional story contains elements of truth. They are not absolute opposites, but rather different modes within the same structure of meaning. This is not merely a philosophical word game. Understanding how opposites break down can help us think more carefully about real issues. Take, for example, the debate over genetics versus environment in human development. In the end, reality is not one or the other, but always both, interacting in complex and inseparable ways. By moving beyond simple binaries, we gain a more comprehensive understanding of problems. As ancient wisdom reminds us, truth does not lie in choosing between opposites, but in seeing how they interweave and complement one another. The violence of writing. Every act of writing, Derrida argues, is a kind of violence inflicted upon meaning. This may sound strange, but for Derrida, writing forces the infinite complexity of thought into rigid frameworks and simplifications. Think about the vast range of emotions you can feel in a single moment. Now consider how few words you have to describe them. Writing compresses that wide spectrum of experience into a limited set of symbols. Consider filling out a form, applying for a job, opening a bank account, or completing a medical history at a clinic. The form offers boxes to check male or female, single or married, employed or unemployed, hypertensive or not. Each checkmark reduces the complexity of your reality into simplified categories. This is the violence of writing. It reduces the richness of human experience into manageable fragments. This violence shapes how we think and live, often without us noticing. Your native language determines which sounds you can easily hear and pronounce. If you learn English, you may struggle with sounds that are natural to speakers of other languages. The writing system you grew up with shapes how you divide the world into categories. This effect is even stronger in rigid systems. Computer programming languages may be the most violent form of writing. Every instruction must conform to strict logical patterns. Even something as simple as a phone number breaks down your identity into digits that can be tracked and organized. Yet this violence is not always negative. Simplification can help us understand. Scientists build models that intentionally ignore certain aspects of reality to highlight underlying patterns. Legal systems reduce complex situations into clear categories of right and wrong. These are useful forms of violence, allowing us to build shared understanding and create social order. What matters is recognizing this violence when it occurs. When a news headline reduces a complex event into a single simplified story, you are witnessing the violence of writing. When you struggle to name an emotion because no word seems adequate, you are confronting the limits of language. Recognizing this helps us use writing more consciously. We can seek ways to let complexity shine through, even as we simplify. And we can remember that every written word is only one possible version of truth, not truth itself. Through of Grammatology, Jacques Derrida reveals that writing, in its broadest sense, is not merely a tool for recording language. It is a complex system built upon differences that make meaning possible. This system operates through traces, where every concept carries within it the shadow of what it is not. Meaning depends as much on absence as on presence. Traditional binary oppositions, nature, culture, inside, outside, collapse upon closer inspection. Categories are not separate. They constantly interact and blur into one another. Every act of writing or classification simplifies the complexity of reality. This violence is both limiting and useful, shaping how we think, understand, and live. By seeing writing in this way, we gain a deeper awareness of language, meaning, and how we interpret the world around us. Reading of Grammatology is not just an encounter with a book. It feels like stepping into a new way of perceiving the world. Derrida forces us to pause and reconsider the assumptions we take for granted about language, meaning, and truth. What struck me most is how something as ordinary as writing, something we often overlook as secondary, can actually be the very foundation of how we think and understand reality. The idea that meaning is never pure, never fixed, but always shaped by differences and traces of what is absent, has changed the way I look at words. Every sentence I read or write now feels less like a closed statement and more like part of an ongoing conversation that stretches across time, culture, and human experience. I also found myself reflecting on the violence of writing. Derrida is right language simplifies, categorizes, and limits. And yet, without this simplification, we could not communicate or build shared knowledge. This tension between limitation and possibility reminds me that all acts of expression are both empowering and constraining at the same time. Perhaps what I value most from this book is its invitation to embrace complexity. Instead of searching for neat binaries or ultimate truths, Derrida teaches us to dwell in the spaces where boundaries blur and opposites intertwine. That perspective feels not only intellectually liberating, but also deeply relevant to how we live in a world shaped by constant change, interconnectedness, and ambiguity. Finishing this book, I don't feel that I've reached the answer. Rather, I feel equipped with a sharper awareness, a way of seeing hidden structures, noticing the traces, and questioning the categories that frame our thinking. And maybe that is exactly Derrida's gift, not to give us certainty, but to awaken in us a more nuanced and critical way of engaging with meaning itself. Perhaps there is no last word, only endless interpretation. If this idea fascinates you, join us for more explorations of books that change the way we see reality. Until then, keep questioning, keep reading,